Hello and welcome to the Smart Divorce podcast. Today we're continuing our theme of domestic abuse, and I'm very, very pleased to be joined today by Sam Fisher from TDAS, which is the Trafford Domestic Abuse Service. And she's going to tell us all about what the service does, how it provides help and assistance for those who have been in or are in abusive relationships. Sam, thank you so much for joining me. I'm going to let you give us a bit of this is why I do this is what I do, and this is how I've come to be in this position, because you're the CEO of TDAS, aren't you? So you head up the service. So give us a bit of background on you and how you got to where you are.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me, first of all, Tamsin. Really, really pleased to be here. Well, I guess, I kind of fell into the work, to be honest. So I originally was training to be an educational psychologist. But during my time at uni, I did some kind of bank type work at a homeless hostel in Salford.
Wow.
And I loved it, absolutely loved it. And then the opportunity came up to work at TDAS. It was Trafford Women's Aid back then, and in 2010. We changed our name a few years after that, just to kind of break any barriers for males maybe wanting to access the service.
Makes
But
sense.
yeah. And I started working in the refuge, in our family refuge, as a family support worker. So yeah, nearly 15 years ago. And
Wow.
again, loved it, absolutely loved it. So didn't kind of go with the career that I anticipated. Loved the support element of everything that it was involved in, supporting survivors through that journey. Um, and kind of just really got the opportunity to progress within the organisation. Became kind of the service manager about 4 years after joining. And then in early 2017, the then CEO left, and the board said, "Would you like to do it on an interim basis?" I said, "Yeah, only interim, because I really liked the front line, still working with people." But yeah, that was nearly 8 years ago.
Please tell me they've given you this position permanently now.
Yes, yeah, that was, yeah, they did. Yeah, they absolutely did. And it was more me, it was more because I was really conscious of not doing frontline. I loved the interaction with, survivors and the families. But, doing this job, it's still so rewarding, because you're heading up an organization that is changing people's lives. It just took me a little time to kind of break away from wanting to be frontline. But yeah, so I think a lot of on the job experience, and then some of the things kind of naturally came to me in terms of managing an organization and the funding elements and things like that. So I had really, really good board of trustees who believed in me, and a really, really supportive team. The previous CEO, did a lot of development with me as well. So yeah, nearly 8 years as CEO now.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And am I right in saying, obviously, we're talking to you as Trafford Domestic Abuse
Yeah.
Services because I live in Trafford and our business used to be based in Trafford, although we're in Manchester now. Um, and you're my local domestic abuse service. Am I right in saying there is a domestic abuse service accessible in most, if not all, areas of the UK?
Yeah, there is. What that looks like can be different in areas. Unfortunately, it can be a little bit of a postcode lottery for survivors,
Right.
because again, funding dependent. Everywhere has to have safe accommodation now due to the
Right.
Domestic Abuse Act. So every local authority will have some form of safe accommodation. And yeah, so we also deliver services in Salford as a part of a partnership. So we deliver some the Safe in Salford partnership, which is an amazing service. That's really kind of collaboration across partners, delivering different elements of support. So that's fantastic. But yeah, the majority of places will have some domestic abuse support. what that looks like, just, it really does depend on the area. But there's national support helplines as well, for people if needed to access. And I think it's important to kind of get across that it's not necessarily having to be living in that area for us anyway. People can work in that area or have children go to school in Trafford and we would still support them. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Fabulous. Okay, so when we spoke, when we were talking about the possibility of you coming on the podcast, we talked about, so I think I asked you the question, can you tell me about the services that TDAS offer? And I think about 45 minutes later, we came up with breath.
Yeah.
Because you really do so much stuff. So I'm going to break it down a little bit this time, because I feel like that question was too big, because there's so much that TDAS do. So let's start off with, if somebody is currently in an abusive relationship, they haven't been able to leave for whatever reason yet, or it may not even be on the cards because they might not even think it's feasible for them to leave. So they're currently in a domestic abuse relationship. How can TDAS help? How can they access your services safely?
Yeah, and I think it's really important that you've raised that, because there is still some assumptions that services won't support people if they're still in an abusive relationship, and they absolutely will. We do. I mean, there's a lot of safeguarding and safety planning that has to obviously come with this. So we do have a one kind of front door approach. So we have a support line that is accessible for survivors and professionals, and also family and friends if anybody wanted advice. So that would be mainly the first port of call. If there was no other professionals involved and the professionals wasn't making the referral into our service, there would be the support line. And that can also be just for advice and guidance at that very early stage. That, we don't even need to take details of the person calling if they don't feel it's safe to do so. We would always try and encourage that, because obviously it's a support, but it's their journey, it's what they're experiencing. So it's important that we, it's person-centered and we follow their lead. So initially, contact the support line for advice or guidance and support. We do have other avenues, so people can go on our website and use the contact form. Then we do have social media. We wouldn't always encourage victims to use that as the first port of call to contact, but that if it's the only safe way to do so, then again, that could be picked up from there. But ultimately, it would be contact our support line for that initial, advice and guidance.
Brilliant. And to keep them safe, it is always possible to use a friend's phone, mobile number, computer address, email address, whatever.
Definitely. And we would always ask safe times to contact, if it is even safe to, we do support some survivors where we just can't contact them. We have to wait until they contact us again. So it's, the safety element of it is key and it's vital. So we have to initially, before any advice and support is given, the safety is the main topic of conversation in how we can communicate, how can we make sure that we can provide that guidance, that support, that, advice in a safe way that doesn't put them at further risk.
Of course. And if the victim does want to leave, does want to cut ties, are TDAS able to help them to do that? And in what ways can they help them to do that? Because I know I've heard, unfortunately, victim survivors say to me that people have just gone, well, why don't you just leave? And we know that why don't you just leave it's not as simple as that, because there's money, there's where do you go, there's will they be safe if they do leave, there's and there are other things tying them to staying in the relationship and staying where they are, and it isn't as straightforward as just why don't you leave. So just back in track again, because I got myself talking then and we're get back to the question. So can you help people leave, and if so, how do you support them to?
Yes, absolutely. We can support. Again, safety planning and risk management is key. So there would be a real in-depth piece of work on what that would look like, all the things that you've just spoke about, that people have to navigate, they have to consider in terms of their children. It depends on whether they want to leave and look for elsewhere to live, whether that be a refuge, whether that be to go and stay with family and friends, or whether they want support in obtaining relevant orders or kind of putting target hardening interventions on the property. If the perpetrator, if it's not the perpetrator's house, for example, but they want to end the relationship, or so it's really, each individual case needs to be treated as an individual case, because everybody's dynamics and what they've got to deal with are completely different. But the key is that safety planning and that risk management. Have they got everything they need? Sometimes they just can't. Sometimes they need to just go. And then once they're out of that situation, we can still support them to maybe then obtain stuff that they need to get from the property if they've had to leave. But going back to what I know you said, you digress, but it's so key that, like, we really need to change that narrative of why don't they just leave, and it'd be like, well, why don't they just stop? That's the question that should be asked, because how hard is it to leave a non-abusive relationship with the amount of things you've got to think about? So when you add abuse into that mix, it's so difficult, and that's why our support staff, that's the priority is their safety, and we need to make sure that it's not rushed. Sometimes it needs to be, sometimes they need to leave immediately, but if it's safe for them to do this in a real planned way, that would always be the advice, because survivors, the risk does heighten when they end the relationship. So that safety plan is absolutely key.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that question that makes you and me shiver, because it's like, it's not that simple.
Yeah.
If you're not involved in this work, if you haven't worked or been an observer of victims' survivors, it does feel like a straightforward thing to do. Just get out, just go and stay with family, just go and stay with friends, just get out. And the problem is, I think what a lot of people don't understand is that domestic abuse is about control, and the perpetrators are controlling everything. And what they tend to have done is isolated their partner from friends, from family, from finances, from having a job, even in a lot of cases. So they don't have that network of people that people in non-abusive relationship have. And therefore it feels very straightforward to go, why don't you just leave? But actually there are so many reasons why that's not possible. And am I right in thinking that it takes something like 7 times for on average to leave an abusive relationship? Is that a figure you've heard, or?
It's probably more on average.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then figures do differ a little bit depending on whether people are deemed high risk, or, I mean, we have to, in this sector, we have, that is how, we manage the support that we offer. We complete risk assessments, and people are deemed high risk or medium risk. But I think what we also need to remember is risk's fluid, and and everybody experiencing domestic abuse deserves that safety and support to flee or to end a relationship if that's what they wish to do so. But yeah, it is really difficult and it's only around education. And it's not that, although it does make us shiver when we hear them questions, but it is just an education piece, isn't it, in terms of and that's why it's so vital that things like this happen for the public to see, because it's just increasing that awareness, because we should be educating everybody on the dynamics of domestic abuse, and on them changing the narrative and the typical things that we hear people say. And going back to the isolation, that does happen a lot. We have a lot of survivors that come to us and they've got no support network, and it's a reason why they've stayed in that relationship for so long. and or that they might not have believed. Perpetrators are expert manipulators. To the outside world, they may be the best thing ever because
Yeah.
they hide it so well. So it it is about that, the feeling that survivors often feel in terms of the guilt, the shame, the worry. Will they be believed? What about the children? Like you say, the finances. Financial abuse is just, we see that time and time again, that's used as a means of control for them to stay in that relationship. So I think it's just so vital that we do educate people on the difficulties. And we launched not long ago our Friends and Family Toolkit on this basis. So we've got a kind of section on our website. It's like a resource toolkit for friends and family on just the right things to say, the right
Yeah.
things to do, where to signpost your friend or your family member who might be experiencing it to go to, because they might be the first person that somebody
Yeah.
discloses to, or they might not even disclose what that family or friend has got kind of them concerns that something's going on, which is why the
Yeah.
support line's available for people to access that advice as well. So yeah, I think that's the piece of work we're really proud of being able to launch recently, because it's so key that we can support the people around the survivor as well.
Absolutely. Because let's be honest, if 1 in 4 women, and is it 1 in 7 or 1 in 8 men, are victims
Six,
of
yeah,
domestic abuse, we all know people,
yeah,
we all have friends in our networks, we all have family members who are in this situation. So we do need to change the narrative, and hopefully, there's lots of us who are certainly trying to do that. So moving on, the let's talk about the post separation,
yeah,
because there is this urban myth that once you've left, everything will be all right, which
yeah,
is why there's this, why don't you just leave? Because everything will be fine once you've left and relationship's over. But post separation abuse is in some ways even worse than the abuse that was happening when you were in the relationship, because it seems to, in many cases, really ramp up
yeah.
once the relationship's over. So how can you support somebody who's left the relationship, even if they're not in a refuge or being supported by you for the leaving process?
Yeah, again, it'll be really person centered around what that individual needs, but we would support if there was housing that they needed to look at, housing options, or like I said before, again, the target hardening, if they needed certain things put on their property to make them feel safe. We have group programs that people can access, which is with other survivors. And again, when you've been isolated and you feel like you've got this guilt and shame, them environments can often be really comforting. They can be quite uncomfortable in the first session or two, but after a bit, like, you've got that peer support, and we have that for children and young people as well, because we have to remember, if there's children there, they're victims in their own right. They've experienced domestic abuse, and as well. But we support with um, you know, any financial support that they might need, whether that be, if they've had to leave a job, or they have to reduce hours, or they need to now apply for benefits, we can support with that. Any legal kind of advice and support. So we try and work with local solicitors firms that can offer like free 30-minute appointments to get that advice, because not everybody, especially if they've, experienced financial abuse, can afford the
Sure.
fees, which is really,
Yeah.
it is a real challenge at the moment. And then we can support with, if they've had to move area, so we can support with helping them set up in that new area with all, like, maybe their physical needs that they may have. I mean, it's, the list's endless. We work really well. We collaborate with a lot of really good partners who can support and provide that holistic offer, so they can start their journey of breaking free from domestic abuse. But it can be a lengthy process, and especially if there's proceedings and there's courts, and the delays in that can take a long time. So it's about that continuous emotional and practical help in whatever way they may feel is is right for them at that time, because again, everybody's priorities are different at that point. Um, it might be they need new school places for their children, or they need to put safety measures in place at the current school. I mean, there's so many different things that we can support with, and advise and advocate. And advocacy is a big one. So we do advocate a lot with other professionals if there's other professionals involved. With the family. So yeah, it's a whole host of things, real person-centered support plan on both practical and emotional aspects of their life.
Amazing. And I think one of the important things that I've picked up from talking to you is that you're going to know things that the victim survivor might not think about. There are areas that don't necessarily cross your mind when you've been going through all this stuff, that your experience will say, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? Are these things that are going to impact you? And that helps to put things in place before the issues start. And it's kind of preventative, really, rather than kind of reacting to what's happened. So I think that's really important. You've used a term a couple of times that I have no idea what it means, so I'm going to ask you. I think it's target hardening.
Oh yeah, sorry. Do you know
That's
something?
all right. No, don't worry. I was
Yeah,
just like, I had no idea what that means. So I'm
I
going to
mean,
ask.
yeah, I mean, this will honestly, there's so many things. We love an acronym as well. So if any of that comes out, please do let me know. And when you're in it, you just kind of assume.
Of
So I'm sorry
course.
about that.
No,
Yeah,
not at all.
so target hardening. So that they are kind of measures that you would put on a property that could include window locks, a safe fire guard on a letterbox. It's all about safety aspects for a property where a victim survivor would like to stay in the property.
Right.
So it might be security lights, security alarms. So yeah, I mean, there's not much funding for it specifically. And we
Yeah.
work quite closely with our community safety team, and we do also raise, do some fundraising campaigns for them specific things. But it's all about security and safety of a property.
All right. Well, didn't even know that was a thing. That's amazing.
Not everybody wants to leave, do they? That's the biggest thing. They want to be able to stay in their own home and be safe. Refuges, yeah, they are, they're a vital service. But if we can help somebody stay safely in their own home, then that's what we would want to do.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Absolutely. I totally get that. That makes complete sense. Um, how long, so, and this might be how long is a piece of string, but how long do you tend to carry on working with people? Is it just until everything's kind of, I'm saying just everything's sorted, in terms of, obviously, a lot of relationships and marriages or civil partnerships? Is it until that, or is it until like how long, or could it be years and years because they need ongoing support, because actually things are still going on
Yeah.
well after everything's resolved?
Well, our services are trauma informed. We want to offer the support for as long as we possibly can to enable them to cope. And we don't often say recover. It be, because not everybody does. Everybody kind of just learns to cope with what they've been through. But that their journey. So our services, because we offer so many different kind of projects and different ways that people can access support, they could be within in our service for 2 years. I mean, the average is probably around 6 months. On a kind of outreach basis. When you talk about accommodation, it's a little bit more complex because there's things external out of our control for them, to secure additional housing. But in terms of in the community, that is on our, but some people will be accessing our service for 12 months, if not more. But that might look different. So it might be that when they first come to our service, they're supported, by one of our domestic abuse advisors who help them with that initial safety planning, the risk management. We do we sit down and do support plans with all our survivors that is really person centered to them, so it highlights the areas they want support with. Then once we've kind of looked at them, we've put them interventions in place, and they may no longer be in crisis, as we say. Then it might be that they would attend one of our group programs, which is a 6-week program on kind of the realities of domestic abuse, with the aim of reducing that social isolation, being around people who are in similar situations or have experienced similar things. Their children then may want to access some of the group programs or our one-to-one support with our children and people's workers. I think the one thing that does determine the length often is when there's court proceedings, and because of the delays in them. But we have a really a fantastic volunteer service. We have the most amazing volunteers that dedicate their time to our service, who can, once a lot of the crisis intervention and the risk for that individual is reduced, it might be that our volunteer then continues some of that support. And then if there is court proceedings, for example, then our workers can step back in when that, the court hearing, and when they need support with that. So it can really depend, but I think we don't like putting a time limit on it. I think historically there used to be such a big emphasis on outputs instead of outcomes. And it was like, how many people can you support in 12 months? And it's like, well, it's not just about, these are people, they're not numbers. We need to be making sure that they're in a place where they understand about domestic abuse. They know, they recognise the warning signs, and they're less likely to enter an abusive relationship again in the future. And even if they do, they know what to do in that situation. So I think we need to be able to offer an intervention for as long as we can to prevent that cycle from repeating. Which is why having so many different elements of the service is just brilliant, because people can choose what's right for them at what time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You mentioned about court proceedings and about your workers perhaps coming back in when there's court proceedings. How do you support people who are in court proceedings?
So our staff, where capacity allows, we would always try. They would help, attend court with them. We have to remember it varies as well for each individual person, because, if there's not a criminal conviction, then that can be really difficult, especially if there's like divorce proceedings, again, child arrangements. So we, will help them with attending court and and being there as a support for them if they require. We would link them in with our local solicitors firm to get that advice and support. It is a lengthy process though, and that's why having that volunteer service really helps buffer in between that time, so they're still getting that ongoing emotional support. But they would help them with, if they wanted support with kind of any statements that they need to give, or any arrangements for attendance at court. Sometimes survivors don't want to be like visible in a courtroom with the perpetrator there. So liaising, with all the other professionals involved in that to support that process. And just being that advocate with other professionals, just so their voice is heard.
Yeah, absolutely. That is fantastic. And just before we started recording, we were talking about your incredible lunchtime learning sessions. So can you tell us a little bit more about those, who they're aimed at, and what your aims are for running those series?
Yeah, so one of our key objectives is to raise the public's awareness about domestic abuse. Like, it is everybody's business. It really is. And that's not to say that everybody needs to be a specialist in it. And no, it's about just having that awareness. Talk, like you said before, about changing the narrative and knowing what's not to say, and where to signpost to. So we offer professionals training in Trafford, for Trafford professionals, volunteers, the community, and we've got quite a large library of what we offer. So we have domestic abuse awareness. We do a session on civil orders. There's so many different ones, but we have a lot of lunch and learns. So they're like 30 minutes, 45 minutes. And they cover so many different topics, whether that be housing, stalking, one specifically on gaslighting. I mean, even at Christmas, we do one around domestic abuse and Christmas and the impact of, and the correlation between certain things for that time of year. The aim is just to educate as many people as possible on domestic abuse in different areas of because it's so complex. I mean, I think we did say before we started recording as well, like we could literally probably talk for a week about all the aspects and the issues and the challenges and, and the rewards and the good things that come, for survivors. But them lunch and learns, they're free. People can access them through our website. And yeah, I just encourage as many people to, take the time out and see which ones they feel are right fit, what they want to learn more about. And yeah, so that's kind of the key aim, is to raise that awareness. That's thanks to funding from Trafford Council as well, who really are, they really, really want to educate the whole of Trafford on domestic abuse, which is why we're able to offer that for free as well.
Excellent. Well done, Trafford Council. God,
yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So other than the awareness and the learning for the general public, I know you also have services for professionals who work with victim survivors on a regular basis, people like myself, people like solicitors, divorce coaches, etc. What's available to them, and also how do they, because I know that they can refer somebody to your services if they feel that they would benefit from them. So can you talk to us a bit about how they would refer somebody as well?
Yeah. So again, that could either be through the support line if they wanted to call us, or on our website. They could just signpost somebody, so they could give a victim survivor, our details. Yeah. All the information is on our website in terms of referrals into our service. If people know exactly what service they want to access, then they can do that. But a lot of the time, it might be they just
need help.
Yeah, and then we determine maybe what service it is that might be right for them. But we do have a training offer for corporates as well, because again, I mean, unfortunately, this one isn't funded, so there is a charge for it. But we said before, didn't we, around 1 in 4 women, 1 in 6 men. So it's happening within your workplace. There's the amount of time that's lost, because domestic abuse is happening and it affects people's ability to work. So we have a corporate offer as well, and it's really bespoke to organisations, and it's around supporting, whether that be line managers or the HR team, around how to support somebody within your organisation who might be experiencing domestic abuse, and how to, make sure you've got a domestic abuse policy in place, how you communicate that you will support people within your workplace who are experiencing domestic abuse. So that's key as well, for people to have that awareness, and because it might be your staff that you're referring into us, not somebody you're working directly with.
Absolutely, it's massively important. As always, we're coming to the end of our time together. I knew this would fly, and we'd end up wishing we'd got that more time. But Have I missed anything? Is there anything else that you want to let us know about that TDAS does?
Um, Gosh.
Big
No, I
question.
think we've covered. I mean, we again we have accommodation services, and I've spoke about the outreach, and I guess the main thing is around that, that awareness raising, and you know, the fact that our services are available for professionals and family and friends and people who may be concerned and just want some advice. I think that's a big thing to get out there, that we are there to give advice to other people who may be concerned about somebody else. I think we have to remember we are not going to be the first service somebody comes to who is experiencing domestic abuse. We're just not. So that's why it is so important that people are aware about what domestic abuse is, how it can affect people, and where to signpost to or ring for some advice and support.
Yeah, absolutely. Massively appreciate you joining me, Sam. Thank you so much. And all the details for contacting TDAS will be in the show notes. If you or somebody that you know is experiencing domestic abuse, whether it's pre or post separation, please do reach out to them. If TDAS isn't your local service, then please do get on Google. I think there's an app. I'm sure somebody told me the other day, I think it's called Bright Sky. Does that ring
Yeah.
a bell to you? Is that one? And I think you can look up your local domestic abuse service on there. Obviously, only download the app on your phone if it's safe to do so. If not, please get a friend to do it. And yeah, thank you, Sam.
Thank you for having me. Thank
My
you.
pleasure. Thank you for joining us. And if you have found this useful, then please do give us a 5-star rating, and that enables us to get this information out to further and wider to more people. So many thanks.